These frames have frightened thousands of people around the world. Light portals, fiery objects, strange figures, and shapes that should not exist at all have appeared in the sky. The most terrifying thing is that this is not one single case and not one single country. Such things are filmed over and over again. And the further the video goes, the harder it is to believe that there is a simple explanation for all of this. Now, you will see the most creepy and inexplicable phenomena in the sky that were caught on camera. In California, a man was returning home and saw an accumulation of orange light in the clouds, as if glowing embers were suspended right in the clouds. It was not isolated lights or a flash, but a dense fiery group that was in no hurry to disappear and hung in the sky for so long that anxiety had time to be replaced by stupor. Similar footage always has a strange effect. The brain looks for a familiar explanation: lanterns, fireworks, a reflection. But the shape is too alive, too heavy for an ordinary version. And the longer the object remains in place, the stronger the feeling that you are not observing a random light effect, but something that is intentionally present in the sky. In Texas, eyewitnesses raised their heads and saw not clouds, but what looked like a huge funnel rolled right out of light. The clouds twisted into a dense mass, purple and green iridescences flashed along the edges, and a shining core emerged in the center, as if the sky had opened up something hidden inside for a second. But the most alarming part began later. The brightness began to fade, and a thick, dark shape grew in its place. It slowly swallowed the glow entirely, as if someone had drawn a curtain. During a flight above the clouds, one passenger noticed in the window not just light, but something similar to an opened portal. A bright ring flashed in the thickness of the clouds, and short, energetic impulses seemed to burst out of its center, striking the cloud layer below. All this lasted for a few minutes, but it looked as if the sky at a huge altitude suddenly ceased to be a background and became something active, almost alive. What is especially creepy here is that in the air, a person usually feels cut off from everything earthly. And if even there, at an altitude of tens of thousands of feet, something inexplicable appears behind the glass, there is simply nowhere to hide. On one cloudy night over Vancouver, a bright green stripe appeared, as if a giant light source was suddenly turned on behind dense clouds. It stretched out, changed shape, shifted with frightening speed, and every gap between the clouds only added to the mystery. People did not see the phenomenon entirely, but even fragmentary pieces were enough to understand. This does not look like ordinary lightning, does not look like an airplane, and does not resemble the familiar northern lights. An ordinary thunderstorm frightens in a familiar way, but in Dallas, the lightning suddenly behaved as if it had forgotten its own nature. Instead of the usual strike from top to bottom, the flash tore across the sky almost strictly horizontally, drawing through the darkness like a red-hot crack. Then one single discharge grew so much that it illuminated the entire firmament and hung for a few seconds, turning the night into an unnaturally bright scene. In the video, this looks especially disturbing. The viewer understands that a thunderstorm seems to be in front of them, but intuitively feels that something in this movement is going wrong. In Nevada, a man filmed a dark object with a flat hull, which was not flying but seemed to hang in the air, ignoring the familiar rules of aerodynamics. Neither wings nor propellers, nor noticeable movement that could explain the lift. In such cases, what strikes you is not the spectacularity, but the silence of logic. The familiar world seems to run out of clues. You look at the object and understand that you cannot even begin to explain it, because it does not fit into the very first basic scheme. There are phenomena that people perceive not as light and not as physics, but as an image. Over Idaho, a silhouette emerged in the clouds, resembling a human face with long hair. For some, it was just a play of light and shape. For others, something much more serious. Such footage almost always causes arguments, because an ancient human mechanism works here. We instinctively look for faces, even where there are none. But sometimes the resemblance turns out to be so strong that it is difficult for the mind to separate coincidence from a sign. And it is exactly on this border between psychology and mysticism that the most viral and the most disturbing stories are born. Over Florida, a long whitish trail passed through the sky, and on one of its sections, the camera recorded a shape that resembled a head or a profile. Usually, they try to explain such phenomena by the launch of a rocket or an atmospheric trace. But what catches the viewers is not the trail itself, but precisely this figure inside it, because the trace can be taken for physics, and the silhouette already for a message. This is the power of such footage. They provide a sufficiently realistic foundation to believe, and a sufficiently strange detail to begin to doubt. Sometimes the sky behaves as if extra dots simply appeared in it. Over Australia, people noticed several white spheres suspended in the air, too low and too calmly. They did not resemble drones, did not blink like equipment, and did not behave like random lights. The objects just hang, not doing anything spectacular. But this is exactly what frightens. A person almost expects them to break loose, fly apart, disappear with smoke. And they seem to be watching. Over New York. Late in the evening, the entire sky suddenly turned a thick orange color. This was not a local glow, but a real flooding of the horizon. So powerful that the familiar landmarks of the night disappeared. The moon, the stars, the depth of space. The city seemed to be under a dome of red-hot light, and in the air, according to eyewitnesses, a strange heat and tension were felt. Similar scenes frighten because they change not one object, but the whole world at once. If one fire appears in the sky, a person looks at it. But when the sky itself becomes this fire, there is nowhere to look. You are, as it were, inside the phenomenon. In Jordan at dawn, bright arches of light rose above the horizon, resembling a giant rainbow, only not soft and natural, but hard, almost energetic. The phenomenon did not hang high in the clouds, but seemed to grow from below, from behind the line of the earth, and that is exactly why it looked not like an atmospheric halo, but like something coming out into the world. Before a person is not just an object, but an entire structure occupying half the sky. And at this moment, even the calmest viewers understand. Whatever it is, it looks too big for a private strangeness. During a night thunderstorm, lightning sometimes shows more than one would like to see. In Delaware, against the background of clouds, dark figures emerged for seconds. One resembled a walking silhouette, another looked like something with long, falling appendages. Rationally, a person understands that a thunderstorm knows how to create bizarre shapes, but there are frames where the coincidence looks frighteningly accurate. That is precisely why such videos leave a heavy aftertaste. They do not so much show an object as make you feel as if the face of something too big and too alien appeared in the sky for a second. In Detroit, exactly at midnight, a circular composition of lights manifested in the sky, too orderly to seem like random illumination. The points of light formed an almost perfect contour, and for a short time those watching had the feeling as if a passage was either opening over the city or something hidden behind the darkness was descending. Long, elongated objects have featured in the stories of eyewitnesses for decades, but stories are one thing and a video is another. In Minneapolis, they managed to film an oblong object that moved slowly and smoothly, without signs of falling or being carried away in gusts by the wind. It looked neither like an ordinary airplane, nor like a balloon, nor like a random item in the frame. The power of such episodes is that they do not press with special effects. There are no flashes and noise here. There is only shape and behavior, which are enough for us to start mentally going through the options and discover not a single familiar one fits into the picture completely. In China, over an airport, eyewitnesses saw an elongated luminous object from which rays diverged, and several smaller lights kept nearby. One of the small spheres seemed to cruise between the others, as if performing some connecting function. This is no longer just something in the sky. but almost a system inside which each element behaves as if it knows its role. It is not surprising that what was happening then caused nervousness and even delayed flights. A person can accept strangeness as long as it is somewhere far away. But when it appears next to infrastructure related to security, the tension grows many times over. During a night thunderstorm in Thailand, a camera caught an instant that could otherwise be attributed to a trick of the imagination. A flash of lightning for a fraction of a second illuminated a strange pattern in the sky, as if a giant glowing crack passed through the darkness. It resembled neither a discharge nor a cloud, but broken glass, behind which another layer of reality seemed to be hidden. It is precisely this association that catches, when the sky suddenly looks not like a space, but like a surface that can be split. And even if the phenomenon lasted a very short time, sometimes one such frame is enough so that the familiar view of the world no longer returns to its previous state. In Florida, people saw not one luminary on the horizon in the morning, but several bright spheres at once. Some were orange, others were blindingly white, and a part of them seemed to pulsate, either intensifying the light or sharply throwing it off. The most unpleasant thing in such a picture is not even the extra objects, but the loss of orientation. If there are several suns in the sky at once, then which of them is real? And when the very main point of the day ceases to be obvious, an almost primal anxiety arises. Over Dubai at night, two bright fiery objects appeared, which did not fall, did not burn up, and did not behave like meteors. Instead, they moved synchronously, as if circling around each other along a preset trajectory. In such a scene, precision is frightening. Natural phenomena are often chaotic, but here everything looked too even, too coordinated, too neat. Moreover, the objects left behind a light smoky trail, which only intensified the feeling of the materiality of what was happening. They did not break down and did not dissolve gradually. They simply disappeared. Sometimes not a flash arises in the sky, but a vertical, one from which you want to look away, but you cannot. Over Dubai, the clouds turned red, and a thick shimmering pillar of light appeared in the center of this crimson mass. It did not look like lightning. Too even, too dense. It held for too long. There was a feeling that a column of light had been lowered down from the depth of the sky, as if this was not a weather episode, but a certain process that has a direction and a purpose. And the longer the phenomenon lasted, the less it resembled an accident. In Australia, residents of a neighborhood woke up at night not only from the light, but also from a sound. Over the houses, the sky flashed so sharply and frequently, as if a giant faulty mechanism was working somewhere in the darkness. At first, many decided that the problem was in the wires or the transformer, but filming from another point showed the source is located higher, right in the clouds. The combination of light and hum is especially unnerving. When the sky does not just glow, but seems to answer with a loud, heavy crackle, the scene ceases to seem distant. It seems to descend to the earth, into the personal space of a person. A doorbell camera in Arizona recorded an object that appeared in the frame as a huge white sphere, almost devoid of details due to its own brightness. It moved across the sky not in a jerk and not in a fall, but confidently, as if it perfectly knew the route. An especially strong effect is created by the domestic setting. This is not an observation deck, not a field, not a mountain peak, but an ordinary residential area where people expect familiar things: a car, a passerby, a neighbor. And it is exactly into such a familiar frame that something that looks like a concentrate of light suddenly enters. In Saudi Arabia, a massive dark shape resembling a flat disc appeared over a city. It was framed along the edges by an orange glow, and the center was so dense that it seemed as if the light of the day was simply absorbed there. The scale causes special anxiety. This is not a small object at an altitude, but something that visually dominates the entire landscape. Even if you look for an earthly explanation, the emotion from this does not become weaker. because the human eye does not tolerate large, dark shapes in the sky well, especially if they look too even and too separate from the rest of the cloud pattern. During the day in Idaho, a camera caught a strange object of clear angles and sharp edges, while it looked translucent, as if it was simultaneously both in the air and beyond its limits. In such footage, what catches the viewer is not simply the unusualness of the shape, but the impossibility of reading it correctly. An airplane is understandable, a balloon is understandable, a drone is understandable. But when an object consists of geometry that does not add up to a familiar silhouette, the brain literally begins to stumble. And if a feeling of camouflage is added to this, the effect becomes almost fantastic. One observer filming the night sky noticed strange white dots that moved too fast and chaotically for stars. They seemed to swim in place, change trajectory, and for a second created the feeling that the night sky consists not of distant objects, but of a living layer where something is moving very close. Not far from an industrial zone on the Space Coast, a worker noticed above him a round, flat object that did not reflect light, but seemed to be its source itself. It moved smoothly and without jerks, leaving a feeling of controlled gliding and not flying in the usual sense. The repeatability gives special weight to this story. The eyewitness claimed that he had seen something similar, not for the first time, and at approximately the same time. And that is when a single strange case turns into something stickier, because one inexplicable episode can be attributed to an error of perception. But when the phenomenon returns, a completely different conversation begins. During an evening training session, bright orange spheres appeared over a football field, looking like slowly rising fiery clumps. For the teenagers, this looked not like a rare spectacle, but like an immediate threat. The objects were too noticeable, too alive, and too close to be treated calmly. Contrast creates an especially strong effect here. Just a second ago, an ordinary field, a ball, a familiar space. And then this space seems to cease to belong to a human. Over Bogota, 4 bright sources of light emerged in the cloudy sky, located too evenly to seem like an accident. They did not move, did not change order, and did not flash chaotically. On the contrary, the whole scene gave the impression of a single structure hidden behind the cloud layer. What looked especially strange was that when the lights disappeared, the foggy mass itself over the city seemed to also begin to dissipate. Sometimes the camera catches neither light nor an object, but a shape that should not exist in the sky at all. On one of the videos, something resembling a translucent creature with tentacles is visible, which does not fly, but rather swims through the air, like a marine animal in the water. And this is exactly what confuses the most. We are ready for lights, spheres, trails, even for strange silhouettes of equipment. But when a phenomenon begins to resemble a living creature, a completely different level of the familiar picture of the world is disrupted. Over the pyramids in Giza, eyewitnesses filmed strange geometric shapes that resembled inverted pyramids, quickly passing through the cloud layer. The coincidence of place and shape works almost perfectly here. It is one thing to see a triangle in the sky anywhere, and quite another to notice it precisely over those structures that for centuries have been surrounded by secrets, versions, and myths. In different cities of Texas, people filmed light shapes resembling either cracks or waves or cuts in the sky itself. They appeared briefly, but looked as if another layer was emerging through the darkness. Not a light source, but exactly the border of something else. A single video can always be attributed to an angle, an artifact, an atmospheric effect. But when something similar is seen at different points, the story ceases to be just a private impression. Over Denver, eyewitnesses noticed a powerful light beam, as if breaking downward from the clouds. And inside this column of light, a dark figure or object could be guessed. By itself, the beam already looked unusual, but it was exactly the dark insert in the middle that turned the picture into a real visual hook. Human perception is structured in such a way that we instantly cling to a contrast, brightness around and an unknown dense shape inside. And when this happens not in a feature film, but in the real sky, the frame begins to work almost at the level of a dream. You're not entirely sure what you saw, but the feeling of anxiety is absolutely real at the same time. Stories about triangular crafts have been appearing for many years, but they always frighten for one reason. Such a shape is too recognizable and too purposeful to be perceived as a natural accident. People from different states filmed dark triangular objects that hung quietly, moved smoothly, and did not give the impression of ordinary equipment. A person expects to hear any large craft earlier than to see it. But when something massive turns out to be almost noiseless, the fear becomes much deeper, because sound gives a feeling of the physical world. And the absence of sound from something large and close gives rise to a feeling of a violation of the very rules of presence. Late at night over Shanghai, a long white line stretched across the sky, and at one of its ends, bright clumps of light swirled, rotating with unusual speed. Upon approaching, strange irregularities became noticeable along the line itself, because of which it ceased to look like an ordinary beam or trail. In Vietnam, a man noticed an object in the sky that remarkably resembled a jellyfish in movement and shape. A translucent body, a rounded upper part, hanging structures below. Everything looked as if a marine creature somehow impossibly ended up not in the water, but in the air. It is precisely here that what is most terrifying is not the fact, but the association. We know perfectly well where such shapes should be located, and therefore the transfer to another environment is instantly perceived as an error of reality. In Norway, tourists, instead of a beautiful evening view, saw a flat, shiny object in the air, which hovered and slightly changed its angle, as if balancing on an invisible support. It had no visible wings, a jet trail, or signs of habitual flight, but it had a trait very unpleasant for perception: a too clean shape. When an object looks like a perfectly assembled metal part, a person almost automatically reads an artificial origin in it. And then a completely different chain of questions is launched. Not, what kind of cloud is this? But, who made this? And why is it here? Over Santiago, people saw an object that was noticeable mainly by lights, as if the hull itself was hiding in the darkness or camouflaging itself. At some point, it gave such a powerful beam downwards that a whole section of the city instantly drowned in white light. This is one of the most cinematic types of observations, because a motive of action appears here. The object does not just hang and does not just glow, it seems to do something directed, and a person perceives any directed action as an intention. On one of the strangest videos in the sky, a luminous halo with a white center is visible, which does not remain unchanged, but seems to live its own life. Small light dots go down from it, and then these dots themselves turn into semblances of new rings. The picture produces a creepy impression precisely because of the idea of reproduction. An ordinary anomaly frightens as an isolated case, but here, a feeling of a process arises that is capable of spreading. And even if the viewer does not believe in any mystical versions, the visual image itself works flawlessly. Something big creates something similar to itself, and this is already one of the deepest human triggers of anxiety. And perhaps one of the strongest episodes is the sky over Perth, where the clouds first began to flash red from the inside, and then 3 light stripes stretched down from the scarlet mass. They looked neither like lightning nor like illumination, because they held too evenly and too long. And one of the stripes additionally shifted over the city, as if searching for a direction. An alarming color, clear geometry, duration, and movement. This is no longer just a beautiful or scary frame. This is a scene that feels like an event. And exactly such moments make the sky the strongest screen in the world. When it shows something strange, it is almost impossible to turn away. Sometimes it is not the light that frightens, but the geometry. Over Oklahoma, people noticed a strange grid of intersecting trails in the sky, as if someone had stretched a giant transparent lattice over the city. From the ground, it did not look like ordinary contrails from airplanes, but like a too neat, almost drafting drawing. The lines diverged, splintered into squares, and the longer they looked at this, the stronger the feeling arose, as if not a natural pattern, but a diagram had appeared over their heads. And when the sky suddenly begins to look like markings, people inevitably have the exact same question. Is this an accident or someone's calculation? There are phenomena that seem not natural but almost digital. Over Oklahoma, people saw an even bluish grid under the clouds, as if an electrical framework emerged in the air for a second. It would disappear, then manifest again, as if someone could not hold the image stable. The strongest impression here is made not by the color and not even the shape, but the feeling of a glitch, as if the surrounding world suddenly for a moment showed its internal markup. Such moments hit the psyche especially well, because a person is afraid not only of the unknown, but also of the thought that the familiar reality might turn out to be arranged completely differently than it seems to us. Sometimes anxiety is born not from the shape, but from the combination of colors. In Colombia, an eyewitness filmed how a bright green light rapidly moved in the clouds, and then a second one appeared next to it, red, heavier, and more ominous in feeling. Together, they looked not like random reflections, but like something coordinated, as if two independent sources were working in the sky simultaneously. In Brazil, right before the new year, a luminous cross appeared over a city. It was not drawn by the beams of searchlights, did not tremble, did not crumble, but simply hung in the air, clear, bright, almost motionless. People were especially strongly affected by the moment of disappearance. The shape dissolved almost exactly at midnight, as if it was tied not only to a place, but also to time. Such footage almost always causes not an argument about physics, but an argument about meaning. For some, it is a sign; for others, an optical phenomenon; for still others, a rare coincidence. In Los Angeles, an observer initially decided that he was seeing meteors, but the longer he looked, the clearer it became. This was something else. The glowing stripes moved too slowly, changed shades, and illuminated the clouds, as if the source was not somewhere far away in space, but was working right here, within the visible layer of the sky. Over Florida, drivers noticed a dark ring in the night sky, behind which a long, almost endless trail trailed. The ring itself looked as if it was not formed in the air, but was placed there as an already finished object. And this tale only intensified the feeling of movement, which no one could trace to the beginning or to the end. One simple thing works here. A circle is too perfect a shape for random fear. When something closed, clear, almost drawn arises in the sky, a person automatically begins to perceive this not as a cloud, but as a sign. And the longer they look at it, the stronger the internal feeling grows that this is something addressed. What do you think about these videos, and in general? Tell your stories of observing such phenomena. I think there will be very many of them. Write comments, like, and subscribe to the Top Facts channel for compilations of the most incredible facts and videos from all over the internet. Thank you for watching, and right now watch the next video that has appeared on your screen.